We're also recapping the Kings preseason opener. And how fun that we get a Kings preseason opener in a year. And I know we've talked about this before, but in a year where, hey, man, there's expectations, there's things to watch, and not like, hey, how does the draft pick look? It's great. Totally agree. It's so much fun.
It is. It is fun. The switchover is crazy, and you're hoping that they're building, and that, I think a lot of fans came in. They're like, oh, we keep hearing about this physicality, and physicality equated to fouls. So that was one issue.
That's fine. You'll take it right now.
Yeah. So let's recap the good. The good was we had off-ball movement. The cuts were incredible. We had Keegan Murray showing us Keegan 2.0 and who he might be able to be this coming season. We had Harrison Barnes. And the Harrison Barnes thing, it's a big deal because if you remember last season to start the year, the Kings start 0-4, and Harrison Barnes for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season did not look like Harrison Barnes at all.
Mm-hmm.
He was a player that that you didn't think was going to come back during the offseason. He almost got traded to the Phoenix Suns at one point,
and
then didn't. And then all of a sudden he's back, and everyone's like, oh, okay, well, this is a swan song. Well, Harrison Barnes in game 1 of preseason looked like Harrison Barnes in midseason form. He was super athletic, super aggressive. I thought he played really, really well. That's a very good thing for the Sacramento Kings. I'll keep saying this. If Harrison Barnes is your third best player, that might not be a perfect scenario, but he's still good enough to be a third best player.
Yeah.
And if he can be your fourth best player, you're a really good team. If he can be your fifth best player, you're an excellent team.
Yeah. I think he's an way overqualified fifth best guy.
Yeah.
But I think you feel really good about the Kings if he is just firmly their fourth guy.
Yeah, their fourth or their fifth. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
And I keep putting him in this group of players. Your third best player, it's Keegan, it's Harrison.
It has to be Keegan, dude.
Well, yeah, you hope so. But you have Kevin Huerter and you have Malik Monk. You have these 4 guys that are kind of floating around that third best player. One of them needs to ascend to be that third best player, so they all kind of fall into some sort of imaginary pecking order, which doesn't mean anything other than for us to discuss.
I don't know, we got stuff to get to here. I just think long term, it needs to not be like Keegan Murray. If they're going to ascend to this height of like, hey, here's a perennial title contender, it has to be him.
I agree.
It can't be, oh, hey, some nights it's like, sure, there's going to be nights where other guys go off, but it needs to be, hey, he is the third guy, no questions asked.
Well, that, and if he can't be, then you're going to have to go find one.
Yes.
That's the
totally
key.
Agree.
That's where we're at. Outside of that, we had Sasha Vezenkov coming off the bench. A lot of fans are confused by why Sasha is coming off the bench. He scores 12 points. I'll have to get more of a definitive answer from Mike Brown about this, but look, last season, people might forget that KZ Okpala started the first 3 games of the season for the Sacramento Kings. That third game, he played 4 minutes. What Mike Brown was doing was, number one, Keegan had a little bit of a bump or a bruise right at the end of training camp, but he was also saying, like, look, you have to earn it. We don't just have somebody walk in the door and take somebody's job. We've had people who have been here all year long, who have been here 2 years, who have worked really hard. Trey Lyles has worked really hard. Kessler Edwards has worked really hard. There are people here that have put in the time and the energy, and we're not just going to hand a job to somebody who flew over from Europe and, signed a contract and who's never played in the league, and all of a sudden he's ascending. So I think there's a little bit of that. Right now, we're going to see, like Sasha will probably start playing more and more, but he's got to acclimate to the league. He's got to understand the league. He's got to understand the speed and the quickness, which clearly there are moments where he does have some issues there.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like, look, he can get better, but this is where we are. For right now, let Mike work his magic with him, because it's about a team, and it's about letting a player fit into a team and not forcing him into a team where it's awkward and it doesn't feel right and people get their feelings hurt. You got to show this team that Sasha deserves those minutes, and he needs to earn those minutes. And eventually he'll be in there and he's going to play, I would predict on the season 16 to 20 minutes a game, maybe 18 to 22 minutes, that sort of window. He's going to be a major part of what you're doing.
Yeah, you hope so.
Yeah. And then I'll also point out, he was in the game with JaVale McGee and Trey Lyles. He was playing the 3, which I have not seen. That's not something you thought might be functional. But when I saw him as a player, I was like, oh, okay. He looks more like a 3-4 than a 4-3.
Yeah. The issue, I don't want to say issue, the question with that specific lineup, that specific trio, because that's what these games are for. You're trying stuff out and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Lyles and Vezenkov can space the floor plenty to allow JaVale McGee to exist in a space where he's not going to be a liability.
Yes.
Right. But what can that group play defensively? And that's where Vezenkov in that group, that's the largest question mark. Is he going to be able to defend some of the more athletic threes that are in the NBA? I think that's what they're going to figure out with him over the course of this preseason. Because offensively, I don't have any questions.
I don't either.
I just don't.
I don't. And I don't have any questions whether Trey Lyles can play the 4 or the 5. I wonder if they're going to try to give him a little bit of action at the 3, or if he and Sasha can actually be forwards that can play both and can switch. I think that's a big question. Lastly, on the plus, we had Davion Mitchell with 8 points, 3 assists. He did turn the ball over a few times, but I thought he was really good defensively. And I also thought the shot, he just looked so confident, like let it rip. Kyle, you brought up JaVale and his impact. And I totally agree. We're kind of gun shy here in Sacramento because we've seen things in the past, right? That either work or don't work. And for me, one of the things that never worked here in Sacramento was Tristan Thompson. And he talked a big game and everything's great. And like all this, like how much he's going to mean to the team. And then when push came to shove, he wasn't good enough on the court to actually play.
Sure.
And so you're always worried about that with a guy like JaVale, who's 35,
100%.
Who's coming in, and you're like, oh.
And coming in from a Mavericks team that needed help.
And they waived him.
Right.
And
I have questions about JaVale still, for sure.
They ate 2 years of contract. They're going to pay that guy for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, they stretch provisioned him. He's going to get a paycheck from them for 5 years. So
yeah, man.
So, okay, let's skip to the bad. The bad, I thought the second unit as a whole did not play well. They gave up an 8-0 run to finish the first quarter. They came out in the second quarter and got stomped. I thought that Mike Brown tried to give them extended minutes together. And I also think that's why you didn't see Sasha. It wasn't like he wasn't doing a knee-jerk reaction. Hey, let's bring in Sasha and see if we can fix it. This is preseason.
Yeah.
We need this group of players to really meld together. And I thought there were too many fouls. They were it was nonstop. Like at one point in the mid-second quarter, I think it was like Toronto had already been to the free throw line for 19 attempts. And we're like, okay, that's not going to work out. And then the other thing, Chris Duarte is a player that the Kings acquired because he's physical defender, because he's played with Sabonis. He's young. He's young enough. I mean, he was an old rookie at like 24, like 2 years ago. So he's like 26 and they got him on a pretty solid deal. He looked out of sorts. His shot was not good. He went 0 of 6 from 3. He had 4 personal fouls. He had turnovers. He made some egregious mistakes that were those turnovers that you can't have, where you basically just give a guy a wide open layup on the other end. I thought he really, really struggled, and that would be like sort of round out my bad on. Do you have any bads?
No, the Duarte thing is a problem, though. I don't want to. No problem. Let me back up. Not for the Kings necessarily, but for him. Because I don't know if he's not making threes and if he's not defending without fouling, then what is his role here?
Yeah.
Like, that's literally what he got drafted to do. That's what he's supposed to be good at. Is he's supposed to be like a very modern, like 3-and-D guy. And again, it's one game. I'm not writing off Chris Duarte.
Yeah. But I'm not either.
Right. But that's one that I'm circling out of this when you look at last night. And you look at, okay, what are we taking moving forward? What are we leaving in this game? What are we looking at down the line? That's one that I'm going to watch him very closely moving forward, because if that's just going to continue, I don't know how he has a spot or any kind of role here.
I think he's already up against it. Mike said he'd like a 9.5 man rotation.
Yeah.
If I'm going to make this weird, it's either JaVale or it's him.
Mhm.
because I think if JaVale is playing, that means that Trey's playing the 4. That means that Sasha's going to play the 3, and that means that someone's going to lose. And we
Mhm.
still have minutes we have to steal from that 3 position
Yeah.
for the Kevin Huerter,
Mhm.
Malik Monk, with Davion Mitchell backcourt. Somebody's got to
Yeah.
bleed over and play the 3. I'm not saying Davion's going to or Monk will play the 3, but you're going to have to steal some minutes. The ugly to this game, the Kings got crushed on the boards, which is something that was a huge issue in the playoffs. Game 1, 59-45 advantage for the Raptors. I'm going to flat out call out Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes. Neither of them had a rebound. That's not okay.
Tough.
That's not okay, and it
happen.
can't be part of who you are. And what we saw from Harrison Barnes in the last half of the season, where he averaged 3.5 rebounds a game for like the last 30 games, that's not good enough. He needs to be a better rebounder. And Keegan Murray, when they asked him during Summer League to go out and rebound, and then he didn't, that was an issue. 3-point shooting, 10-45. That's not going to do it. And then the defense was bad. They still need to make more adjustments.